The defense grid over Coruscant went dark at sundown, and not one person on the planet noticed. Millions of citizens filled the plazas below, laughing, arguing, moving through what they believed was an ordinary evening. Their orbital defenses had already been disabled from the inside, and high above the city's glow, a dropship loaded with Sith warriors was descending through the upper atmosphere. In the dying light, a man in a cowl moved through the crowds. His breathing filtered through the black respirator covering the lower half of his scarred face. He checked the chrono on his wrist. A small girl crossing the plaza caught his eye. She ran to a woman waiting on the far side, looked back over her shoulder at the man in the cowl, and buried her face in her mother's neck. He watched her go. The Jedi Temple rose 4 blocks ahead, its ancient stone towers burning orange in the setting sun, and before dawn it would be rubble. The man had walked towards this for most of his life. On a dead world lined with ancient Sith tombs, a vision had come to him, burning systems and a republic reduced to ash, and he had spent every year since walking towards it. The people around him knew none of it, not even his name. On an Imperial estate, long before any of this, a boy stood in front of a cage covered with a tarp while his father walked away. When the boy pulled the tarp away, the cage held nothing. Chapter 1. The Chosen Child. In the Legends continuity, the boy's name, before they gave him another, was Veridun. He grew up on an Imperial estate, the ward of an adoptive father who worked as a biologist in the Imperial Science Corps. The man was soft around the middle, pressed crisp in his uniform, with round glasses and a voice that never rose above a murmur. The family had their own private zoo across the estate grounds, its collection financed by the Empire. Hundreds of creatures from dozens of worlds filled the habitats and tanks and cages. Veridun had helped tend the animals since he could walk. The Imperial Science Corps did not know it, and the household at large may not have known it either. The cold nature was already growing inside the boy. Veridun was still young when he killed one of the household servants. She was a Twilight woman who had committed some minor offense he could not later recall, and he did not kill her in anger over it. The offense was beside the point. He reached into the Force and stopped her heart to find out whether he could. When she dropped, he stood over her body and felt the certainty of it settle in him. His father saw the body and felt pride. Soon after, the Empire sent evaluators. The test confirmed what the father had already suspected about the boy. He arranged transport to the Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas. But before the shuttle came, he took the boy to the zoo one last time. They moved through the habitats and tanks filled with animal heat and noise. The father wore his Imperial uniform even here and spoke quietly. At the Kuan tank, he lifted a feeder rat from a nearby cage and dropped it into the sand. Though he had told Veridun he had already fed the creature that morning, the rat froze on contact with the sand, its whiskers twitching, and then the sand near it shifted and bulged. The Kuhan erupted from the sand, a segmented arthropod as long as the boy's arm. It seized the rat in its mandibles, bit it in two, and burrowed back under the sand. It left the carcass where it fell. The father asked why the creature killed something it had no need for. Veridun called it instinct, a savage animal killing for the sake of killing. His father knelt to his level and agreed, then drew the lesson. Senseless savagery was the province of animals, not men. In a man, violence had value only when it served a purpose. The end was everything. The second cage held what looked like a ground bird, a small, drab Virsun caring for a nearly grown offspring. Veridun had watched Virsun in the zoo for years and never found them interesting. His father watched this one the way he might observe a new specimen he had not finished cataloging. Veridun and his father watched as the offspring turned on the mother, pecking at first, then with increasing force, until it seized her neck in its beak and shook her once, twice, and dropped her. It stood over her body and fed. The offspring was not a Virsun at all. It was a Mimnil, a creature that in its juvenile state was indistinguishable from a young Virsun. It had replaced the original chick at hatching, been raised by the mother it eventually killed, and waited until it was ready to change before showing what it was. The father told Veridun to trust no one, and to be most suspicious of those who looked weak. A third cage waited at the far end of the zoo, covered by a tarp, and Veridun had never noticed it before. The father stood beside it and told the boy that a shuttle would arrive the next morning for Dromund Kaas. His instructors had never seen potential like his in any student they had trained. He had always been proud of him, and always would be. He embraced the boy, then walked away without touching the tarp, telling Viridun to look inside and figure out the third lesson on his own. The boy called after him. His father did not turn back. When the tarp came down, the cage was empty. Viridun stared at it for a long while and thought he understood, though the answer never felt complete. Sometimes there was just an empty cage, and whatever a man chose to do when he faced one was answer enough. The shuttle came the next morning, and he boarded it alone. His father did not come to the landing pad. Chapter 2. The Making of a Weapon. The Sith Academy on Dromund Kaas was where Viridun became Malgus. The Empire had waited in the unknown regions for over 8,000 years, building its armies in the dark, while the Republic grew comfortable at the galaxy's center. The Academy pulled Force-sensitive recruits from every Imperial world and shaped them into something the Republic had forgotten existed. Malgus was suited to the warrior path from the moment he arrived. His size, his aggression, and his ability to draw on the dark side outpaced nearly everyone trained alongside him. He had no patience for Sith politics, the endless working for position and favor that most of his peers treated as the real curriculum. He ignored it, he fought, he trained, and for the next several years, that was enough. Years passed, the Great Galactic War began, and it was Malgus' first true test as a Sith warrior. His master was Darth Vindicant, a pureblood Sith of the old school, deliberate and experienced, who carried a double-bladed lightsaber. Their assignment was the war's opening blow. Korriban was the ancient home world of the Sith, held by the Republic since the last war. The Empire had rebuilt itself in exile, and Korriban was the name attached to everything that exile had cost. Taking it back was not just a declaration of war, it was the statement the Empire had been building towards since the exile began. They boarded the Republic orbital station above the planet and found two Jedi waiting. One was a Padawan named Satele Shan, the other was her master, a Zabrak battlemaster named Kaosen Derek. Derek carried two lightsabers and held both Sith at bay long enough for Shan and a smuggler named Nico Akar to reach their ship. He wounded Vindicant early and drove a blade through his chest. Vindicant went down. Derek turned to Malgus without pausing, moving to keep him occupied rather than pressing for a kill, giving no ground he could not spare. He was buying time for Shan and Akar to reach the shuttle, and he was good enough at it that the dock cleared before either Sith could stop it. Malgus picked up his master's double-bladed weapon and came at Derek with both sabers in hand. Derek was outmatched, but before he could adjust, Malgus cut him down. The Empire reclaimed Korriban before the day was over. Afterwards, Malgus went to where Vindicant lay and crouched beside him. His master told him that their success in reclaiming Korriban was only the beginning, but Malgus was not listening. Vindicant had failed to stop a Jedi Padawan, and it did not matter what physical state he was in. In the Sith Code, this type of failure was not tolerated. Malgus killed his master. He walked the surface of Korriban alone in the hours that followed, through the rocky deserts and the canyons lined with the tombs of ancient Sith. The Force was everywhere on that world, older than any war being fought above it. In the silence of the valley, the Force brought him a vision. He saw systems burning, a galaxy-spanning government falling, fire at the center of the Republic. He stood in the dust and received it as a fact. It told him he was the one meant to bring it about. Chapter 3. The Long War. The Sith Empire and the Galactic Republic fought for 28 years, and Malgus was present for most of it. On a mission to Geonosis early in the war, he came across a Twi'lek slave being beaten by her owner in a workyard. Malgus killed the owner, though he was not entirely certain why. His first kill had been cold and deliberate, a question with a clear answer. The Geonosis killing was different. He took her away from the yard. Her name was Alina Daru, barely out of her teens, with a scar at her throat and no experience with weapons. He gave her blasters and taught her how to use them. Alina learned fast, fighting on his flanks through campaigns. Within a few years, she became one of the most dangerous people in any room she walked into. Under fire, she was steadier than most of the Sith Malgus served alongside. Alina had the means to leave, with access to weapons, contacts, and ships, but she decided to stay. Officially, Malgus called her his servant. The Empire's rules about attachment were clear, and he understood them better than most. The title was far from the truth, but Malgus kept up appearances. He moved through the war's campaigns and built a reputation that preceded him. Jedi who recognized his name found reasons not to engage him. Those who did not recognize it fast enough learned the distinction at the cost of their lives. His peers in the Empire gave him room, and his rivals worked around him. One of his most persistent adversaries was Lord Adras, a political favorite with Dark Council connections. Adras was the type of Sith who believed that politics was the real battlefield. He had cultivated a specific alliance with Darth Angral, and through Angral he reached the kind of imperial authority that Malgus's battle record could not touch. The meeting rooms Malgus refused to enter held the stronger kind of power. He claimed credit in dispatches for victories Malgus had won in the field, and the Dark Council believed him. Malgus did not file any counter-report. He did not have patience for that kind of fight, which was precisely why Adras kept doing it. By the war's third decade, Jedi Masters were careful before assigning students to any sector he operated in. He had spent those decades studying the Jedi as carefully as any commander studies an enemy he expects to face for the rest of his life. He knew their code, their training, the principles that made them predictable. A Jedi would not abandon a wounded ally, would not strike a fleeing enemy, and would shield civilians before pressing an attack. He had won engagements across 20 years by forcing those choices before the Jedi understood the choice had already been made for them. The title Darth came to him in 3667 BBY, just before the Empire launched its assault on Alderaan. The assault was intended to take a world the Republic considered safe from the war. Holding Alderaan would prove the Empire's return was permanent. Malgus led the surface campaign, while Republic forces scrambled to respond. Then a Republic Special Forces unit called Havoc Squad arrived, and with them came Satele Shen, the Padawan who had escaped Malgus on Korriban years earlier. She was now a Jedi Knight. A commando in that squad, a man named Jace Malcolm, detonated a grenade at close range directly in Malgus's face. The blast tore through his skin and knocked him back. Before he could recover, Shan hit him with a force push strong enough to drive him into a rock face. Then a second blow that dropped him to his knees. She pulled a burning tree down between them and bought Malcolm enough time to run. The Imperial forces called for a retreat. Malgus did not retreat. His shuttle was already climbing when he picked up a light-side presence in the Force, somewhere in the rubble of a scorched Alderaani town. His breathing had turned rough and wet. Each breath pulled through the exposed tissue where the grenade had taken his face, and his lungs were giving him less than he needed. He overrode the landing ramp anyway, told his pilot to drop altitude, and stepped off the edge. The ruins held a trap. A male Zabrak with 2 lightsabers brought buildings down on top of him, while a second Jedi named Vorin moved into position. Malgus drove the rubble clear with the Force, killed Vorin before he could close the distance, and put the Zabrak down with lightning. He stood over the body in the silence of the ruined street and heard only his own damaged breathing. Alina nursed him back over the following weeks. She told him afterward that he had come close to dying. She said it plainly. When he was well enough to walk, he put on a respirator. The grenade had destroyed his face, and the battle had done the same to his lungs. He wore it from then on, and she never told him it made him look like anything other than himself. Chapter 4. The Sacking. The plan had been running for months. While Darth Angral, a Dark Council member who held authority over the operation, led false peace negotiations on Alderaan, Sith forces moved against Coruscant from multiple directions at once. The planet's orbital defense grid went down first, disabled from within by a Mandalorian mercenary named Shae Vizsla, a bounty hunter the Empire had employed for its most dangerous operations. Military response was misdirected, scattered, pulled towards the wrong sectors, while the real assault came from the inside, and Malgus walked through the middle of it all, cowled and unremarkable, moving through millions of citizens who had no idea their planet was already failing. Alina moved beside him. Her twin blasters were hidden under her cloak, and her lavender skin caught the setting sun as they crossed the plaza towards the Jedi Temple. He checked the chrono on his wrist. For 15 years, she had been on his flanks. He knew the sound of her blasters as well as he knew his own breathing. He did not examine what that meant. The dropship was still in the upper atmosphere, 50 Sith warriors aboard, set to hit the temple's facade at speed the moment the countdown reached 0. He had asked Darth Angral for permission to lead the entire assault alone. Angral had refused, insisting that Lord Adras command the dropship team while Malgus approached on foot. Adras was well-connected, politically careful, a Sith who understood meeting rooms better than battlefields. Malgus used his scorn for the arrangement to sharpen the anger he was already carrying. The chrono hit 0. The dropship tore through the temple's front wall. Malgus was through the entrance before the dust settled, his crimson blade taking the first defenders before they found a target. Alina moved on his flanks, her blaster steady with years of fighting beside him. Sith warriors poured from the wreckage behind them, and at the far end of the main hall, stepping through the smoke and falling stone, was Ven Zalo. The Jedi Master held a particular calm that Jedi cultivated as a discipline, a stillness Malgus had always taken for weakness. In the Force, Malgus was everything Zalo was not. The temple guards and Jedi held the hall with real skill, and Zalo was extraordinary among them. He gave ground on his own terms, drawing Malgus into overextending himself rather than taking the force of each exchange. Malgus cut through everyone standing between them. They met at the center of the hall, and for a while, the rest of the battle stopped mattering to either of them. There was Malgus and his rage, and Zalo and his calm, and 20 feet of air between them. Zalo landed a hilt strike across Malgus's jaw, dislodged a tooth, and knocked the respirator sideways. Malgus tasted blood and kept moving, having enough control to do that much. Then Zalo deflected Alina's blaster shots back into her. 2 bolts caught her and she went down at the base of a column, eyes closed, blasters on the floor. Everything he had spent years holding back gave way in a single moment. A wordless sound tore out of him. A column cracked down its full length from the force behind the sound. Malgus turned it all on Zalo. The control Zalo had spent a lifetime building held for a time, and then it did not. The Jedi Master had nowhere left to move. Malgus caught his blade in a lock and drove his own through Zalo's abdomen. Zalo hung there on the red blade and looked at him. Malgus told him it was all going to burn. He waited until Zalo was dead before he pulled the blade free. Then he stepped over the body and went to Alina. She was alive and conscious. When she saw him, she called him Veradun, the name he had before he became Malgus, and she said it in front of every Sith warrior and Imperial soldier still standing in the hall. He did not correct her. He lifted her and carried her out. The temple fell behind them, its towers folding inward in a cascade of stone and dust that filled the plaza for blocks. When it was down, Malgus walked back to the entrance and sat cross-legged in the doorway. His warriors took up positions around him without being asked. Together they watched Coruscant burn, and for a time, the vision on Korriban and the reality outside the temple doors were the same thing. Then a message arrived from the fleet. Darth Angral reported that peace negotiations were continuing on Alderaan and that Coruscant was not to be destroyed. The Empire would withdraw once the Republic signed the treaty. The sacking of the temple had been a bargaining move, calculated to force a political settlement. Malgus was sitting in the doorway of the building he had just burned when he learned this for the first time. A score of his warriors had died to strengthen Vitiate's bargaining position. He sat in the wreckage of his vision and said nothing. Chapter 5. The Price of Attachment. Getting Alina treatment cost Malgus more than the battle had. Imperial medical ships operated on a clear priority structure. Combatants first, support personnel second, aliens last, if at all. When Malgus brought Alina aboard the flagship and demanded she be treated, the medical staff pointed him towards protocol. He made his position on protocol clear in terms that left no room for interpretation. They began treating her. He did not know that Adras had already moved. Using his connections, Adras had rerouted the orders. Alina ended up in an alien ward on a secondary vessel with half the staff it needed and none of the equipment the flagship carried. She was listed as a servant, low priority, non-combatant, alien, and the ward treated her accordingly. By the time Malgus found out and crossed to the secondary vessel, she had been waiting for hours without proper treatment. He had made a scene on the flagship that junior officers would discuss for years. He went to her anyway, pulled her from the ward, and brought her back to quarters he secured against the objections of everyone who outranked him on the ship. Darth Angral summoned them both to the Chancellor's office on Coruscant, now occupied by Imperial staff. Adras was already there when Malgus arrived, standing at Angral's desk with a glass of wine he had sourced privately and a version of the battle's events that emphasized his own contributions. When Malgus entered, Adras did not wait. He addressed the room about the battle's final movements and arrived, in his account, at the point where Malgus had exited the temple carrying an alien servant rather than continuing to press the Imperial advantage. He presented it as a tactical observation, and everyone in the room understood the point. Malgus came out of his chair with his lightsaber lit. Angrel stopped him, barely, using the Force to hold them apart. The blade went back. Angrel turned the conversation to the subject he had actually called them in for. Malgus had demonstrated obvious attachment in front of an audience of Sith and soldiers and Imperial witnesses. He asked Malgus directly what Alina was to him. Malgus told him she was a tool he found useful and had not wanted damaged. The answer satisfied no one in the room, including Malgus. Malgus demanded an explanation for the peace negotiations, and Angrel's answer was worse than anything Adras had said. The Emperor had planned it from the beginning. Coruscant was a tool, not a conclusion. The sacking of the temple had been calculated to force the Republic into a treaty favorable to the Sith, which was now being signed on Alderaan. The war was ending, and Malgus was being told to stand down. The vision on Korriban had shown him a republic in ash and fire, and what the Emperor had decided to settle for was a political agreement and a pause in fighting. Angrel gave him orbital blockade duty. The assignment was punishment dressed as deployment, meant to keep him away from anything consequential, while Adras and his other rivals reported his behavior to the Dark Council. He ran the blockade and watched Coruscant from orbit through the transparent steel of his command deck, the planet still scarred from the assault he had led. The Jedi were rebuilding. He could see the transports moving through checkpoint lanes, carrying materials towards the planet's surface. The Order had taken severe losses at the Temple, but it had time now, and the Republic had resources. Both were more dangerous than a lightsaber. In the long stretches between checkpoints, he worked through what the Emperor had decided and what it meant, not just for him personally, but for the Empire as a philosophy. His conclusion, developed slowly across weeks, was that the Republic had gone hollow through peace, and the Emperor was now handing the Sith the same comfort that had made the Republic beatable. Malgus could see this clearly and had no way to stop it, and the helplessness of that sat differently than any wound he had taken in battle. During those same weeks, he looked at Alina recovering in her quarters and understood what he had been refusing to examine directly for years. She turned him into a target, and he was looking at his own weakness. He shattered in the middle of a duel with Zalo after she was hit. She had called him Veridun in front of an audience of Imperial witnesses. Every rival he had was now holding that information. He had always known what the Sith Code said about attachment. He had chosen to believe that knowing it was enough, that understanding the rule was the same as being free of it. Chapter 6. The Last Lesson. When Zalo had a Padawan, she felt him die through their force bond at the exact moment the Treaty of Coruscant was signed on Alderaan. Her name was Erin Lanier. The Jedi Order told her to grieve and accept the peace. She abandoned the Order, came to Coruscant alone, and went looking for the man who had killed her master. She ignored her institution's commands and let grief drive her across the galaxy towards an enemy she had every reason to fear. Malgus would have done the same. She found the temple's security recordings and watched what had happened in the main hall. She saw the moment Zalo deflected Alina's blasters back into her. She saw the sound that tore out of Malgus when Alina went down, the column cracking down its length, the duel changing register from control fury to something rawer. The Sith Lord, who'd walked undetected through a planet of 8 trillion people, had a weak point, and it had a face. And Erin Lanier now knew exactly what she had found. She enlisted her pilot, a smuggler named Zirid Kor, to run a trace through Coruscant city systems. Malgus had registered Alina as a servant, which meant civilian quarters, no military escort, and no flag on any watch list. Alina's position came back within the hour. She took Alina captive. Malgus was still on the blockade, watching Coruscant from orbit. Malgus could not reach Alina by comm. He sent men to her location and they returned with nothing. When he traced where she was being held and understood how Erin had used the recordings, the calculation was already clear. The Jedi had converted his greatest weakness into a demand. Her terms were simple. He would grant safe passage off Coruscant to her Republic allies, or Alina would die. He had military orders requiring him to deny exactly that kind of departure. He had the reputation of a Sith Lord who had never bent to an enemy's terms. This time, however, Malgus gave in. The terms included a handover. Aaron would return Alina to him at a landing pad in the lower city. Malgus had swallowed wounds before, but none of them had gone in the same way. A Jedi had just made a Sith Lord stand down by pointing at a Twi'lek woman. Aaron had known what he would do when forced to choose. His father had taught him to be most suspicious of those who looked weak. The Mimnil had looked like a harmless fledgling, and he had carried that lesson for 30 years. He had not thought to turn it inward. He went to the landing pad. As agreed, Aaron returned Alina, but neither she nor Malgus expected the handover to be simple. Aaron was seeking justice for Zalo, and Malgus intended to eliminate the threat she posed. Aaron Lanier fought on grief, not Jedi calm. She had studied the recordings. She knew about the respirator and what the Alderaan wounds had done to the lungs behind it. She targeted it twice in the first exchange. She pressed Malgus back with force pushes strong enough to move him, sensed the charge before his lightning came, and moved clear. Her lightsaber work made clear she had not wasted the years since Zalo died. She was skilled enough to hurt him, but not to win. He broke through her defenses. Everything since the peace deal was behind it, the blockade, and Angrel's office, and all of it, and she went down with burns across her skin. He stood over her with his blade ready and made a choice that had nothing to do with mercy or compassion. She had crossed the galaxy for her dead master. She had abandoned her order and her safety for a man she could not save, and she had done it without hesitation. She was the proof of what attachment did to a person, and he understood he had to apply it to himself. He returned her lightsabers and let her leave. Walking back across the landing pad, he arrived at a conclusion he had been moving toward through years of fighting Jedi, without ever letting himself reach it. The Jedi were too dangerous to be allowed to exist, and the reason had nothing to do with their combat skill. They were to the Sith what Alina was to him, a living example of peace, of comfort, a suggestion that the war did not have to continue. He went to Alina. She woke in his arms and called him her rescuer. She said she had always known he loved her, and he agreed. Malgus held her face and looked at her. He told her that loving her was exactly what was wrong. He stood, ignited his blade, and drove it through her heart. She reached for him. Her hands found the front of his armor and held it. She did not fight. She died with her eyes still on his face, her mouth open and no sound in it, her expression not fear and not anger. It was the face of a woman who had trusted completely and could not understand why that trust had just killed her. He stood over her body until his tears dried, and he resolved they would be the last. The vision on Korriban had shown him a galaxy in flames, but standing over Alina's body, he understood that the fire needed to reach further than he had thought. The Republic was not the only thing that required cleansing by fire. The Empire Vitiate had built was no cleaner than the Republic he had been sent to destroy. The one that signed treaties and called the deal a victory would need the fire as much as anything else. After Alina's death, Malgus went looking for Adras, who was still on Coruscant. Adras had moved Alina to the alien ward, called her a mongrel in Angrel's office, and used her existence to damage Malgus at every opportunity. He had helped make her a target. Beyond that, he had spent years stealing credit for Malgus's victories and feeding the Dark Council what it needed to doubt him. During their confrontation, Malgus told his rival there would be no peace with the Jedi, no truce, and that men like him had poisoned the Sith by trading strength for a settlement. Malgus removed his gauntlets and took him by the throat. Adras died without a word, and Malgus dropped him and walked out. The Sith code was clear on attachment. It was a weakness and had to be eliminated. Alina's death freed him to act on what he had seen on Korriban. Chapter 7: The New Empire. In the years that followed, Malgus buried the vision in work. He held a position in the Imperial hierarchy that gave him access, resources, and the appearance of loyalty. He oversaw special operations, advised on military planning, and built influence that came from being too useful to sideline and too dangerous to provoke. Underneath, he was building a power base the Empire had never sanctioned and did not know it existed. He took an apprentice. She was a Fallen woman named Darth Karryd, who had trained as a Jedi Padawan under a master named Nosturl before the dark side offered her power her order had forbidden. Malgus placed Karryd in command of a super weapon called the Ascendant Spear, a vessel built around her ability to merge her own consciousness with its targeting systems. She was brilliant and ruthless, and her existence was proof of the argument Malgus had been making in Imperial circles since the war ended. The Empire was turning away capable fighters for no reason that held up in a war. Every skilled alien warrior who served the Republic instead of the Empire did so because the Empire had refused them first. Kara did not survive the Cold War. Republic operatives infiltrated the Ascendant Sphere during a campaign the Empire considered secure and destroyed the ship with her aboard. Malgus had placed her there as the clearest proof of his argument. Her death removed the proof. It did not change the argument. He had argued openly in Imperial circles that the Empire's refusal to recruit across species lines was a military weakness the Empire had mistaken for principle. An army that refused to use every available weapon would eventually face an army that had not made that mistake. His rivals on the Dark Council dismissed the argument. They did not notice that Malgus had spent a decade building those alliances without permission, recruiting Togruta warriors, alien scientists, and fighters the Empire had refused to consider. He had done it quietly, across multiple operations. He wanted a fleet that no one could track. He had also spent years recovering assets the Empire had abandoned or overlooked. Among them was HK-47, an assassin droid of ancient construction built originally by Darth Revan and dormant for centuries before Malgus found and restored it. Its design, built around the close elimination of protected targets, suited exactly what he was building. The Emperor's disappearance gave him the moment. Rumors that a Jedi had faced the Emperor on Dromund Kaas and destroyed him spread through Imperial channels and refused to quiet down. The Emperor's silence, which stretched from weeks into months without explanation, gave the rumors weight. Darth Arho headed the sphere of military offense on the Dark Council. He moved to fill the vacuum by launching a campaign on Ilum. Rich deposits of Adegan crystals had been discovered there, the raw material of lightsaber construction, rare enough that controlling the supply carried real strategic weight. Malgus watched the campaign and quietly fed intelligence to the Republic forces working against it. When Republic agents killed Arho on Ilum, the seat on the Dark Council opened. Malgus took it and held it for 2 days. In that time, he used his new access to seize the Emperor's mobile command fortress. It was the most secure platform in Sith space, built to house the ruler of the Empire and resist any assault the galaxy could mount against it. He moved it out of reach of both the Empire and the Republic before either could respond. Arcus Woad, the alien scientist he had recruited years earlier, used the Adegan crystals on Ilum to power cloaking devices across the entire armada. The fleet vanished from sensors. No one could locate it, track it, or predict where it would appear. From the fortress, Malgus broadcast to the Empire. He told them the Empire required a new order built on alien alliances and freed from the prejudices that had been weakening it from within. His new empire would not negotiate with the Republic. It would not permit the Jedi to exist. It would not make the mistake of Coruscant again, where a war that should have ended the Republic had instead been traded for a treaty. He declared the position his own, and the signal reached every Imperial command frequency at once. The Dark Council sent forces, and the Republic answered in kind. For the first time since the Treaty of Coruscant, both sides moved in the same direction, towards the same target. Malgus had spent years arguing that the two institutions would eventually cooperate to protect the peace they had both settled into against anyone who tried to end it. He had not imagined being that thing. Republic and Imperial assault teams dismantled his operations on Ilum and boarded the fortress. They disabled HK-47 in the approach corridors and captured Arcus Woad before the end. The teams that reached the Emperor's throne room found Malgus in the seat he had claimed. He fought them there. The combined forces of both sides drove him back across the throne room floor. Republic and Imperial together, more than any single fighter could hold. When he could not move any further, he reached for the console beside the seat and initiated the station's self-destruct. He had seized the Emperor's fortress. He would not leave it for someone else to reclaim. The fortress exploded above Ilum in a fireball visible from the planet's surface, and the galaxy believed him dead. The known galaxy did not record that the Empire had pulled him from the wreckage. Chapter 8. The Weapon Returns. The Empire pulled Malgus from the wreckage above Ilum. Nothing that followed was mercy. Vichy had vanished. The Imperial hierarchy fractured and reformed more than once. A Sith named Asina consolidated what remained and took the title of Empress. Asina had him rebuilt. Enhanced cybernetics replaced what the explosion had destroyed. Pain implants went in alongside the mechanical repairs, running directly into his nervous system. When he moved against Asina's orders, the implants fired. He learned the thresholds quickly and learned what it cost to approach them. He had no title. The Empire used him as its wrath, their enforcer, deployed in situations too dangerous for anyone who had a choice. He did not have a choice. He fought the Empire's wars on those terms. Ossus was the world the Jedi had rebuilt their order around after years of losses elsewhere. A planet they had chosen because they believed it could be defended. Darth Malora was an Imperial scientist who had spent years engineering biological weapons from living creatures. The Empire struck Ossus with both her work and Malgus as the ground force behind it. He arrived as cargo in a supply shuttle and stepped off the ramp into a battle already underway. He had once sat cross-legged in the doorway of a burning Jedi Temple and watched Coruscant burn exactly as the vision had shown him. Now he took his orders from a pain implant. The enhanced cybernetics made him more than he had been before the fortress explosion. The conditioning took his will to act on his own. He fought at the Empire's direction. He knew the difference between a weapon and a man who chooses to fight. He was the first. When the control chip failed, he did not waste the moment. He raided the Enclave on Dantooine, tore through its defenses, and pulled a Darth Null holocron from its vault. The Jedi had held it there for generations, judging Null's techniques too dangerous to leave without a guardian and too significant to destroy. It was one of the few objects in the galaxy that held knowledge of how a mind could be rebuilt after it had been taken apart. The Jedi Council had used techniques like these to reconstruct Revan's mind after erasing it. Malgus used them to find every thread of Asina's conditioning inside his own head and pull it out at the root. It took time. When it was done, he was alone in his own mind for the first time in years. The first clear thought he had was the same as the last one he remembered before the conditioning. The vision on Korriban, unchanged. He surfaced on Elam at the entrance of the Temple of Null. And he was not hiding. The temple had been sealed for centuries. Inside, the darkness was old and dense, the kind that settles in places the living had stopped entering. It held relics of Darth Null, a Sith Lord buried and forgotten long enough that neither the current Empire nor the Jedi Order had thought to control what was inside. Both sent people to stop him. He fought through them. He told the Jedi who faced him that their order and the Sith Empire were the same kind of problem. Both hoarded power and calcified around their own continuation, and neither had been capable of genuine change in generations. He found them as obstacles rather than enemies, which was a distinction that counted to him and meant nothing to anyone else in the room. He operated alone, without an apprentice, a fleet, or a position in any hierarchy. He did not have a name that any living government recognized. He kept moving. The ruins of Elam spread out around him in the dark, full of old stone. Quick note before you go. Members get early access and a few videos that stay off the main channel. If that's interesting, the link is in the description. Otherwise, here's another video about Emperor Vitiate's life you might like.